Hello and welcome to Moneylife. I'm Sucheta Dalal. There is a saying in Hindi, Bandh Mutti Lakh Ki, which means that when your fist is tightly closed, nobody knows what is inside your palm. Now, RTI activist Girish Mittal has prized open this Bandh Mutti of the Reserve Bank of India by asking for inspection reports of banks. One used to think that RBI, being this great regulator, has done such a fantastic job and it probably knew everything that's going wrong with banks. Over and over again, this has proved to be untrue. We know that in ILFS, they had information, they had whistleblowing, they had inspections. And one is given to believe that the inspections actually found wrongdoing and ILFS hadn't bothered to rectify it. Now, it turns out, after Mittal has got reports of HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, Axis Bank and State Bank of India, that there's nothing much over there. He then got the report of Punjab and Maharashtra Cooperative Bank, which I talked about in my previous video blog. Now this time, there again, there was only a report for 1 year because the RBI conveniently didn't give the other three that Girish Mittal had asked for. This time, I'm going to talk about City Cooperative Bank. This is a tiny bank in Bombay with just 10 branches and about 400 crores of deposits. It had 90,000 depositors, which are down to about 50,000. Why is this important? Because it's got a link to PMC Bank, where we have already seen that 8 people have lost their lives out of shock and stress when the RBI one fine day just said they can't withdraw their money and not more than 1,000 rupees could be withdrawn. That has of course been raised to 50,000. But City Cooperative Bank, or CCB as I'm going to call it, is in the same position. The RBI more than 2 years ago brought this bank under some kind of intense scrutiny, but I'll come to that one by one. What happened is that a few months before the PMC Bank failed, it had actually made a written proposal to acquire City Cooperative Bank. So this bank, which is what I call in a zombie state, induced by the RBI through its supervisory action, probably was going to be taken over because the RBI was completely blindsided by what was going on in PMC, which was a massive fraud, as you know, of 6,500 crore. Now, CCB is an interesting case study for 2 or 3 reasons. First being that we have inspection reports of 3 years. Okay. The first inspection report for 2015-16 is also at a time when RBI put it under what it calls a supervisory framework. Now, this means that the bank was already in trouble and the RBI was paying close attention to it. So these 3 inspection reports become important. Also, like I said, there's a connection. It was in the same position from 2018 where RBI said you can't withdraw more than 1,000 rupees. This intense corrective action, or directions as they call, all-inclusive directions, were extended 3 times, the latest being on 17th October, which is after PMC Bank had failed. At that time, the RBI increased the amount from 1,000 rupees to 5,000. Why this big difference between PMC Bank and CCB? Well, PMC Bank had more money, was much bigger in the first place. And the second, that all the noise that has happened after PMC Bank turned the spotlight on CCB. Its depositors came out in the streets, protested, and the RBI then noticed that they exist. And these are also people who have lost their savings, and very magnanimously allowed them to take out 5,000 rupees out of their hard-earned money, which they thought was safely deposited in CCB. This is an outrageous situation, but let me tell you today how much worse it is, because we are depending on the Reserve Bank of India for doing an inspection. It turns out that that inspection is completely hollow, and I'm going to talk about how this works. So, like I said, CCB, apart from all its other issues, was, like all cooperative banks, controlled by a politician. When RBI puts a bank under restrictions, it also gives an impression that this bank can be revived. So when they block you from taking your money, the impression is that it's for your own good, that the RBI is going to work at reviving the bank. But as I've repeatedly said in my last 3 video blogs, they actually make the bank into a zombie, which means that it can neither live nor is it allowed to die. And it is in fact eating up depositors' money as long as the RBI keeps it alive, and only when it finally goes into liquidation, people get that paltry 1 lakh rupees, which is deposit insurance. A lot of people have much less than that, so the RBI doesn't even need to spend the amount. But here's what they say when they actually issue directions which stop you from withdrawing money. So in CCB's case, when on 17th October they raised the amount that could be raised to 5,000, they said the issue of directions should not per se be construed as a cancellation of the banking license by the Reserve Bank of India. The bank will continue to undertake banking business with restrictions till its financial position improves. What does this suggest? That RBI will actually work at improving its financial situation? It won't happen on its own, right? The reality, what pushes it into a zombie bank, is the bank actually is stopped from any further lending. Depositors are stopped from withdrawing the money. Some term deposits or whatever come up, or some money on humanitarian grounds for education and medical emergencies are released, which means that the number of depositors just shrinks. The bank is not allowed to take up business as it should. That's its core business of lending. And it is surviving with no hope. You now have 3 inspection reports that followed what happened in 2015-16, where the RBI conducted its first inspection. That's a report we have, where it was already under what they call a supervisory action framework. So here's what the first inspection, the earliest inspection report I have says, which is for the period ended March 31st, 2016. So even a cursory reading of it shows that already at that time the bank did not have adequate assets to meet its liabilities. There were plenty of other observations, and this is the reason for the RBI action. But instead of improvement, please watch what I say about how things deteriorated even further. At that time, there were 96,000 depositors. Today, there are just 50,000 plus. That means people have steadily managed to get, the smarter guys have managed to get their money out. Why, how, the inspection reports don't even bother to go into it, because it's a bland, insipid template where it looks at certain issues, the board, the audit meeting, most of it completely irrelevant, with nothing to say what went wrong, what needs to be fixed to revive it, and absolutely no plan to bring these banks back to life and back to profitability. Now, in this report, when they put it under supervisory framework, you would have expected that the RBI would dig deep and say, what went wrong? Were the loans at the behest of management? Was there mismanagement? Was it just incompetence? Not a clue. It's just stringing together numbers. As it happens, this tiny bank was headed by Anandrao V. Adsul, who is a 4-time member of parliament from Amravati representing the Shiv Sena. Not only him, but as I show in this table, several members of the Adsul family were also on the bank. But the report is not saying, blaming them in any manner. Were they intimidated because he's a politician and an MP? We don't know. But nothing in the report indicates that the losses or the failure or the decline had anything to do with politics, anything to do with bad lending. So you wonder, what was the RBI inspecting at all? Do we want a narration of what is the capital and what is the capital adequacy and what are the extent of losses, and maybe a few things that are unreported? But that's how it reads, because what else does the RBI find? It only shows poor supervision, and I'm going to read out a few things that are there in the 2015-16 inspection report. It says that CCB's assets would not cover liabilities. We know that. It also says the capital to risk weighted assets ratio, which is the CRAR, was minus 5.2. This is very significant because banks are supposed to maintain a 9% ratio. This is minus 5.2. Okay. Now you would think RBI would focus on improving this. Keep listening to what happens next. Now it also says that the realizable value of assets after provision and depreciation is only 522 crores, which was not enough to meet its liabilities of 547. The difference here is not much, just about 20 crores. But the report says the real paid up value And reserves, which is minus 15 crores, was inadequate to meet liabilities. We've already said that. This is said over and over again in multiple ways. Now, it says there were instances of fraud which were neither reported by the bank nor adequate provisioning made for it. That also wasn't big. Since the RBI has scratched out every detail, we don't know what those cases were and who were the people involved in the fraud. It doesn't go into it. RBI, however, asked for 100% provisioning to be made, so the actual losses were much higher than those that were declared by the bank. It also says that post-disbursement supervision was not satisfactory and there wasn't a clear assessment on whether loans were actually required. Now, you need to go, more deeper than that. You're giving loans to people who didn't really need a loan or didn't really need as much of a loan. So then who made this decision and why did they lend? Is it because those people were willing to pay interest? You would expect an inspection to look at it. Doesn't have any such thing. It also says that the board indicates that the board hasn't bothered about any of the strictures that RBI has passed from time to time. In fact, ignores most of what RBI has said. This was exactly identical to the kind of things they noted about PMC Bank. And you know where that led. So you would think the purpose of an inspection is when you see this, when you see the board ignoring the supervisor and the regulator, you have to take action. You don't blandly note it and think that it will worry them. Why will it? Unless there is something going to happen. Now, here it says in 2015, the bank's reported non-performing assets or bad loans were 11.83% and net NPAs were 8.54%. As against this, gross and net NPAs as assessed by the RBI were significantly higher. They were over 46% and 44% respectively, which means bad underreporting and hiding, but this is how mildly the RBI's inspection report talks about it. So a strict supervisory framework was imposed on the bank, and at that time deposits were quite healthy, 534 crore. I told you they're down to 400, of which 400 were what they call term deposits or fixed deposits, which carried a higher interest rate. Now, all of you probably know that people put money in cooperative banks because they pay higher interest rates than nationalist banks or private banks. Under this supervisory framework, the RBI also asked them to cut down interest rates. You can't pay more. And when that happened, a lot of deposits actually went out of the bank. So at this stage, there are plenty of high cost fixed deposits, and what are called CASA or current account and savings account were just 124 crores. As I said, the implication of RBI action was not to make the bank healthier, but for the deposits to go. Now, 1 year later, what happens? We go to the report of 2016-17. The bank continued to remain under supervisory framework because nothing had happened to increase profitability. Two interesting things over here. The public doesn't know that this bank is in trouble. The depositors don't know that RBI has imposed any kind of restrictions on it. So the bank was free to hard sell and get more members, and in fact increased its capital by 11 lakhs. It's a tiny sum. But tell me, if you know that a bank is in trouble, would you invest in it unless there's a plan for revival? So how did people invest? Obviously they didn't know. Okay. The CRAR of this bank, which already was a problem, it was at -5 instead of 9%, declined dramatically under RBI's close watch and supervisory framework from -5.12 to -28.68. This, they say, is mainly due to high level of divergence in the loan portfolio of the bank. So what did RBI do in that 1 year to make things better? Absolutely nothing, which is why we say putting a bank under that action by the RBI has zero results. Then it says realizable value of assets, that also shows a decline. It was 531 crore, which is less than its liabilities of 600 crore. Okay, so things have only worsened. Real value of paid up capital deteriorated further. The report also says value of deposits as well as capital and reserves are fully eroded. Repeating the same thing, only admitting that it's become worse. So I quote here, to the extent of 11.83%. 8-9%. In simple terms, this means that the bank was already eating up customers' deposits because it was not allowed to do business, and yet there was nothing from the RBI to warn ordinary persons who were depositing more money in the bank. Yes, this is significant. When the bank is in such dire straits, ordinary people were putting more money into the bank because they didn't know. So the inspection report says total deposits increased from 534 crore to 586 crore. Of these, term deposits increased from 409 to 433 crore. But the biggest jump was ordinary people putting money in savings and current accounts, who were really fooled because CASA increased 22% to 124, from 124 crore to 152 crore. This, according to me, is reprehensible because it's actually cheating the people. When RBI restrictions were in place, loans and advances declined from 362 crore to 343. All these numbers sound tiny because this bank itself is tiny. Now, let's look at what happens. So, only negative observation about the functioning of the bank is that the Loan and Audit Committee and Recovery Committee needed improvement. Whatever that means. Why didn't RBI decide who's on the Audit Committee? That year, the inspection report notes that the Chief Executive Officer of the bank resigned on July 2017 on health grounds. Most of us know that resigning on health grounds is a euphemism to say there's nothing more I can do, RBI doesn't let me do business, so there's no point in me wasting my time. So he's gone. Interestingly, now this is very interesting. So the bank is not allowed to do business. This bank, in spite of RBI, still tried to make things better. So what did it do? It spent its energy on improving trading profits. Okay, so the income of the bank jumped a massive 103% because of profit earned from trading on securities. And in fact, the profit earned on trading on securities went up a massive 341%. So that sort of gave hope to the bank. But this is hollow because a bank is not a broker. It's not meant to trade with depositors' money. It's supposed to lend and earn money on the difference between the borrowing cost and lending cost. Now, the report again, inspection report makes it clear that RBI imposed restrictions, hobbled operations, and innocent depositors were clueless. Now let's go to the last report that's available with us, which is 2017-18. By then things had degenerated to the point that RBI brought it under what they call all-inclusive restrictions. Suddenly, who pays the price? The depositors. The clampdown, they can't withdraw more than 1,000 rupees. Why did this happen? Because the CRAR ratio, as I talked about, declined even further from 28.68% to minus 28 to minus 65.46 as of 31st March 2018. So the RBI action happened on 17th April 2018 and all-inclusive directions were imposed. Were the depositors to know any of this? And what was RBI's game plan for 2 years? Absolutely nothing. What are they doing in PMC Bank? Why are people so agitated? Why is it that we think people should go to court? Because this story will repeat itself at a larger level. One interesting finding at this stage is that bulk deposits, which are term deposits from smarter investors, had declined by a hefty 24% at that time. As in PMC Bank, you remember 3 days before the RBI action, a big 24, 25, 29%. Different people have different versions. That many deposits had flown out. Here also, 24% of bulk deposits had gone out by this year. It could have happened for two reasons. Some people had an inkling that they wouldn't be able to touch their money. It could also have happened because interest rates declined to those of SBI levels, so there was no incentive to keep money. So maybe some of the more savvy ones withdrew because of it. Some may have withdrawn because of inside information. Since CCB was made to reduce interest rates, there is no attraction anymore. The rest of the inspection report, like the earlier two, what will it say? Absolutely nothing. It's a checkbox thing because now the bank for past 2 years has been under such close scrutiny by the RBI that any negative findings would reflect on RBI's failure to supervise, under its supervisory framework. But what was the management? What was the plan? How did they plan to make the bank revive? We don't know because there is nothing in the report. In fact, the RBI has no plan. And there are 1,500 cooperative banks. God help you if you have money over there, because the RBI has absolutely no idea. And the proof of this is these insipid reports that have now been released under right to information. Unfortunately, even the courts seem to think that RBI is a supervisor and regulator cannot be questioned. We know that the Reserve Bank of India's failure repeatedly to have market intelligence, to anticipate fraud, to anticipate a big bubble that's building has been so huge. The system pays a price. The RBI has never paid a price. There is no scrutiny. Nobody knows where the RBI inspectors are ever pulled up. I think the short story here is that we the people need to wake up. This blog is not about CCB. It's about those 1,500 cooperative banks, of which maybe half a dozen are very well run, safe, secure. The rest of them keep failing at the rate of almost one a month. They are across states, they are unsupervised. RBI has got away by bleating about dual regulation, but we know from its inspection reports it has no ideas, no plans, and people who deposit money are going to pay the price. We are fortunate that the government is looking, at least the RBI governor says, that the Cooperative Act is going to be modified. Hopefully these banks will be converted into fully regulated banks. But when that happens again, RBI is responsible, because it's not a question of just taking them away from dual regulation. Even after you bring them under RBI's sole scrutiny and spotlight, will RBI do its job? Will it have a plan? When banks fail, what will it do in order to revive them? Will it bring a new management? Will it find a way to make things work better? Will it plug the loopholes? Will it plug the bad actions? Unless that is fixed, just changing regulation is not good enough. Thanks to Girish Mittal and the RTI Act and the fact that we have these reports, we know how hollow these claims of inspection and supervision have been. Wake up, people. It's your money. Where will you keep it if not in a bank? Thank you.